Have you ever found yourself like deep in an Agile sprint, hearing all the buzzwords, Scrum, Kanban, retros, stand-ups, and just thinking, is this really helping me build better software? Or is it just more meetings?
Right. Or maybe you're just really curious about what it actually takes to not just get by, but to really excel as a developer or a tester in these kinds of fast-paced environments.
Yeah, exactly. If that sounds like you, then get ready for a deep dive today. We're going to cut through all that noise and get straight to the actionable insights you really need.
Absolutely. Our mission today is basically to give you a shortcut, to get you really well informed by drawing from this incredibly practical guide. Agile How To: Thrive as a Development Team Member in Scrum and Kanban.
Yeah. The author is Matthew Coxall, a really seasoned Agile pro.
Yeah, and we'll probably just call him Matt as we go through this. What's really cool about his approach is that he wrote this book specifically with you in mind, the person who's actually got their hands on the keyboard, building and testing the software.
That's exactly why we picked this source for this deep dive. It's not your usual high-level kind of theoretical Agile book, is it?
Not at all. Matt really zeroes in on that core question. How does Agile genuinely help my daily work rather than just get in the way?
Right. He demystifies the frameworks, breaks down these sometimes complex ideas into actionable steps that honestly feel like they align perfectly with the reality of being a dev or tester.
Yeah, from the very start, like sprint planning, all the way through to how you can actually contribute to product discovery, which is huge. He gives you a sort of practical compass.
Okay, so let's start unpacking this. First, maybe we should tackle the foundational why. Why embrace Agile in the first place, especially if you're on the development team?
Well, Matt really emphasizes that Agile isn't meant to be disruptive, not in a bad way anyway. It's about enhancement. For developers and testers, he argues it offers these really tangible benefits that directly impact your day-to-day work and even your career path.
Okay, so what are some of those key benefits he points out?
Well, the first big one he highlights is clarity. Just think about how often you might spin your wheels on requirements that are, well, a bit vague.
Oh, constantly. Happens all the time.
Exactly. So Agile's focus on really well-defined user stories, super clear sprint goals, and that daily alignment you get from stand-ups. It all means you should always know what you're working on, and just as importantly, why it matters.
Yeah, the why is key. He argues this cuts down massively on ambiguity and that horrible feeling of wasted effort.
Totally. You're not just busy, you're actually focused on the right things.
And if you know what you're building, that probably feeds into the next point.
It does. Efficiency. Things like iterative planning, using Kanban boards effectively, and especially setting work in progress or WIP limits, they aren't just buzzwords.
Right, they're practical tools.
They're like active guardrails against getting overloaded. They help you focus on actually finishing tasks instead of juggling like 10 things at once.
Yeah, that context switching is a killer for productivity, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's about finding a sustainable pace, getting into deep work.
Okay, so clarity, efficiency.
Yeah.
What else?
Then there's collaboration. Agile really is a team sport, right? It's not just about your individual output. Those structured ceremonies, like the daily scrum or the sprint review, and even the tools you use, they build in these natural moments for seamless teamwork, for aligning with stakeholders, for tackling blockers before they become massive problems.
It really forces that communication.
It does. It's structured collaboration, really. Collective problem solving.
And for developers and testers specifically, quality must be a big one.
Oh, definitely. Matt really champions practices like test-first development, getting as much automation in place as possible, and having those frequent feedback loops.
So you're building quality in from the start.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The idea is that every single increment you deliver is high-quality software, not just fixing bugs later, which we all know is way more expensive and, frankly, just frustrating.
Makes sense. Is there a final core benefit he mentions?
Yes. Innovation. Because Agile is designed to be adaptable, to embrace change, it naturally encourages experimenting and continuous learning.
So it gives you space to try things.
Precisely. It empowers you, the developer or tester, to explore new ideas, maybe try out different solutions without this huge fear of failure because you're doing it in these small, manageable steps, these increments.
So summing that up, Matt's point is that Agile helps you deliver actual value.
Exactly. Value to users, value to stakeholders, and even value to yourself as a professional. It helps you grow and make a real impact. It shifts you from just being a code producer to being a value creator.
That's a great way to put it. Now, you mentioned the book is really practical. How is it structured? Does it follow a logical flow for someone on the team?
It really does. Matt designed it very deliberately to follow the typical workflow of a developer or tester. It makes it incredibly useful as a reference guide you can just dip into.
Okay.
He's basically built this step-by-step journey through your Agile life.
So where does he start?
He kicks off with the foundations, understanding Agile's core principles, the values which we'll dive into, and the main frameworks.
Like Scrum and Kanban.
Exactly. Then he flows really nicely into the day-to-day stuff. Sprint planning, different ways to approach testing, continuous integration, and crucially, how to work effectively with your product owner and Scrum Master.
So it covers the daily grind.
It does, but he doesn't stop there. He then goes into more advanced topics, things like how you can actually drive innovation through your development practices, how to integrate effectively with DevOps principles, and even how to connect your daily work back to the bigger business vision.
Wow. Okay. So it's pretty comprehensive.
It really is. And that structure is great because whether you're totally new to Agile or you're experienced and just want to fine-tune things, you can jump straight to the section you need right when you need it. It really is like that practical compass he promises.
Okay, let's follow that structure then. Starting with those core frameworks, Scrum and Kanban. Matt calls them your core Agile dialects.
Yeah, and as a development team member, you really are the engine room of Agile delivery. Getting a good handle on these two dominant frameworks is absolutely vital. Chances are you're using one, or maybe even a blend of both.
So let's start with Scrum. He calls it the high-performance relay race. I like that analogy.
It's a good one, isn't it? Matt explains that Scrum works in these fixed time box periods called sprints, usually 1 to 4 weeks long. And each sprint is laser focused on delivering a potentially shippable chunk of the product, a working increment.
So it's not just random tasks, it's a focused burst.
Exactly. A focused burst of work.
And what are the key bits inside Scrum?
Well, you've got the sprints themselves, those fixed time periods. They encourage the team to make realistic commitments and aim for a consistent pace or velocity. Then you have the roles. There's the product owner, the PO, who basically champions the customer's needs and owns the product backlog. There's the Scrum Master, or SM, who's like the coach, removing roadblocks and making sure the team follows the Scrum process.
And then there's the development team.
That's you. Self-organizing, cross-functional, working together to build that increment. Your specific job, Matt says, is to really speak up about technical feasibility and make sure things are clear during sprint planning.
Makes sense. And the meetings, the ceremonies.
Right. Crucial, too. You've got sprint planning at the start. That's where you figure out what can actually be delivered, maybe use story points to estimate and agree on a sprint goal. Then the daily scrum, that quick 15-minute sync up. It's for alignment, identifying blockers. Super important that it's the team syncing with each other, not just reporting status to the Scrum Master.
Good point.
Then the sprint review, where you show off what you built, the increment, and get feedback. That feedback loop is gold.
Absolutely.
And finally, the retrospective. Looking back on the sprint, what went well, what didn't, and agreeing on improvements. Matt stresses this is a key place to discuss technical challenges, too.
Okay, roles, ceremonies, anything else?
The artifacts. These are the tangible things Scrum produces, the product backlog, the big prioritized list of everything, the sprint backlog, the specific list of tasks for the current sprint, and the increment itself, the sum of all the done work from the sprint.
And that done part is important, right? The definition of done.
Hugely important. The increment has to meet the team's agreed definition of done to be considered actually finished. It's your quality standard, your gate.
Okay, so that's Scrum, the relay race. What about Kanban? Matt calls it the continuous stream of flow.
Yeah, a different feel. Kanban is all about visualizing your workflow and being really disciplined about managing your work in progress, WIP. It's about smooth, continuous movement.
And where do you typically see Kanban used?
Matt notes it's often used for products that might have a lot of technical debt to manage, or for teams like operations or support who deal with a more unpredictable, chaotic flow of work, like bugs or service requests.
Right, where sprints might not fit as well. So what are the key elements of Kanban?
First is the Kanban board. That visual representation, usually columns like to do, in progress, testing, done. Matt says, as a developer, you need to use this religiously. Moving cards feels good, shows progress, and crucially provides transparency. Everyone knows what everyone else is working on.
Prevents stepping on toes.
Exactly. It's your single source of truth for the work.
And those WIP limits you mentioned.
Absolutely critical. WIP limits restrict how many tasks can be in a particular column at any one time. This is designed specifically to prevent bottlenecks.
So you can't just keep starting new things.
Right. Your role here, Matt emphasizes, is to focus on finishing your current task before pulling a new one. That context switching, he says again, just destroys productivity. Finish, then start.
Makes sense. What else?
Flow metrics. Kanban uses metrics to track efficiency. Things like throughput, how many tasks get completed over time, lead time, the total time a task takes from start to finish, and cycle time, how long a task is actively being worked on.
And how do you use those?
Matt's practical tip is to use them to spot where things are slowing down. If cycle time in the testing column is really high, you know you have a bottleneck there to investigate.
Okay. And delivery.
Continuous delivery. Unlike Scrum's sprint-based delivery, in Kanban, work is often released as soon as it's ready and meets the definition of done. There's no waiting for the end of a sprint. Matt really pushes developers here to advocate for automation in testing and deployment pipelines to make this smooth flow possible.
Okay, so we have Scrum and Kanban. How do you know which fits your team best? Matt compares them, right?
He does, across several dimensions. For cadence, you've got Scrum's fixed-length sprints versus Kanban's continuous flow.
Right.
Best for. Scrum often shines with complex projects where requirements might evolve, and you need focused time to deliver significant features. Kanban offers more flexibility, great for managing unpredictable workflows or for operational teams.
How about planning the work?
Work planning in Scrum happens upfront in sprint planning, where the team commits to a goal and a set of stories based on capacity. In Kanban, it's more pull-based or on-demand. When capacity opens up, you pull the next highest priority item.
And how does collaboration differ?
The collaboration style in Scrum is very team-centric around achieving that shared sprint goal. Kanban can sometimes feel a bit more focused on individual task ownership as items move across the board, although teamwork is still vital for flow.
And the outcome?
The outcome in Scrum is that potentially shippable increment delivered based on the sprint commitment. In Kanban, it's a continuously evolving product with value delivered as soon as individual pieces are ready.
And finally, how does my contribution as a developer change between the two?
Good question. In Scrum, Matt highlights your role in voicing technical concerns during planning, using the daily Scrum effectively to raise blockers, and really championing the quality of the final increment. In Kanban, your focus shifts slightly more towards keeping that board meticulously updated, rigorously respecting WIP limits to maintain flow, and using those flow metrics like cycle time in retrospectives to suggest process improvements. Matt's core point is that understanding these differences helps you thrive wherever you land, always focusing on delivering value.
That makes sense. Understanding the how is crucial. But you mentioned earlier, Matt also dives into the why behind Agile, tracing it back to lean thinking.
He does, and it's a really important foundation. He argues that Agile principles didn't just magically appear. They're deeply rooted in lean thinking, which famously came out of Toyota's manufacturing processes. Lean is fundamentally about maximizing customer value while minimizing waste.
Okay, waste being anything that doesn't add value.
Precisely. And he breaks down the core principles of lean thinking. First, value. You have to clearly identify what the customer truly values and orient everything around delivering that. Anything else is secondary.
Got it.
Second, the value stream. Map out every single step it takes to deliver that value, from concept to customer, and then ruthlessly eliminate any steps that are inefficient or don't add value, like long handoffs or waiting periods.
Streamlining the process.
Exactly. Third, flow. Ensure the work progresses smoothly through that streamlined value stream without delays or interruptions, like a river flowing freely.
Okay.
Fourth, pull. Only start work when there's actual demand from the next step downstream or when you have the capacity. This avoids overproduction and building up piles of unfinished work.
Which links back to Kanban's WIP limits.
Directly. And finally, fifth, perfection. A relentless pursuit of continuous improvement. Always looking for ways to eliminate waste and make the process better. It's an ongoing journey.
It's fascinating how directly these leaning ideas then shape Agile practices. Can you give some examples?
Sure. Take value stream mapping. That's a classic lean tool. In Agile, teams might use it to map their process from a user story idea all the way to production. It helps them visually pinpoint delays, maybe waiting weeks for API specs from another team. Seeing it mapped out makes it obvious where the friction is.
So you can address the real bottlenecks.
Exactly. Then there's flow efficiency. Lean measures this by comparing the actual value-adding work time to the total lead time. Agile inherently tries to shrink that lead time. So Agile practices like minimizing handoffs by having cross-functional teams, automating testing and deployment, and constantly reviewing metrics all contribute to better flow efficiency. It's about reducing that waiting time.
Makes sense. And the pull systems.
Pull systems are core to Lean, avoiding pushing work onto people who aren't ready. Kanban's WIP limits are the most obvious Agile example. You only pull new work when you finish something. But even Scrum's sprint backlog acts as a pull system. The team pulls a manageable amount of work into the sprint based on capacity.
And the benefits are clear, right? Less overload, better focus.
Absolutely. Prevents overload, reduces stress, improves focus, and really encourages finishing tasks. It drives up overall efficiency and sustainable pace.
It's quite striking how many direct lines you can draw.
It really is. Matt shows how Lean's value stream concept informs backlog refinement in Agile. Flow efficiency drives continuous integration and delivery. Pull systems become Kanban's WIP limits. And Lean's continuous improvement is embodied in Agile retrospectives.
So as a developer, understanding this Lean foundation helps make sense of why we do certain things in Agile.
Precisely. It helps ensure your Agile practices aren't just motions you go through, but are actually focused on delivering maximum value with minimum waste and friction. It adds depth to the why.
Okay, that foundation is clear. Now, you mentioned we do a deep dive into Chapter 3, which is all about the Agile values and developer accountability.
Yeah.
Matt seems to put a lot of emphasis on this being more than just mechanics.
He really does. He argues that Agile is fundamentally a mindset defined by those 4 core values and 12 principles in the Agile Manifesto. And crucially, for you as a developer or tester, these aren't just posters on the wall. They actively shape your daily approach to work, how you collaborate, and how you improve.
So they're meant to be lived day to day.
Exactly. They're not just for management or the Scrum Master. Let's break down what they mean in practice for someone writing code or tests.
Okay, what's the first value?
The first is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Now, obviously, tools like Jira, Azure DevOps, GitHub, they're critical for us, right? We couldn't do our jobs without them.
Absolutely.
But Matt's point is that the real power, the real leverage in Agile comes from people talking to people, direct human collaboration.
So how does that translate into action for a developer?
Well, it means things like actively choosing to do pair programming or mob programming to tackle complex problems together, instead of just struggling alone in a silo where you might miss something obvious. It means active participation in planning and backlog refinement. Don't just sit there passively. Matt encourages developers to actually run refinement sessions sometimes, to really dig in and clarify ambiguities before coding starts. Asking those proactive questions saves so much pain later.
Yeah, preventing those mid-sprint surprises.
Totally. It also means proactive communication. Don't wait for the next formal meeting if you have a question. Matt advises just reaching out directly, maybe pinging the tester or the product owner for quick feedback or clarification. Real time is better than batching up questions.
Okay.
And finally, cross-team collaboration. Thinking beyond just your immediate Scrum team, working with others maybe during discovery, or figuring out dependencies with other teams.
To breaking down those silos.
Exactly. Matt shares a great example. A remote team was struggling with slow code reviews. Instead of just blaming the tool, they scheduled regular short pairing sessions 3 times a week. What happened? Feedback cycles got dramatically faster and code quality went up. It showed that direct interaction really trumped the tool's limitations.
That's a powerful illustration. What's the second value?
Working software over comprehensive documentation. This one can be misunderstood. It prioritizes delivering software that actually functions and provides value.
But it doesn't mean no documentation, right?
Absolutely not, and Matt is very clear on this. It's about finding the right balance and focusing on effectiveness. Is the documentation genuinely helping you build and maintain the software? If not, it might be waste.
So what does effective documentation look like in this context?
Well, firstly, it means prioritizing clean, maintainable code. Code that's self-explanatory, well-structured, easy to understand without needing pages of comments. In a way, the code becomes a key part of the documentation, living documentation.
Makes sense.
Secondly, Automate documentation generation whenever you can. Use tools to auto-generate things like API docs from open API specs. It saves time, ensures consistency, and keeps docs up to date automatically. Thirdly, leverage demos. Show, don't just tell. Explain functionality by demonstrating the working software itself rather than relying solely on massive technical spec documents. And Matt adds a good point. If you have a support team, make sure they're in those reviews to see the changes firsthand. And fourth, a really critical one, get involved in product discovery right from the start. Talk to the people who understand the problem and the desired outcome. This ensures you understand it too, and you can help create user stories based on that shared understanding. It avoids those situations where a business analyst hands over a huge spec document written in isolation, which inevitably leads to problems.
Yeah, been there. Matt shares examples of this.
He does. One team saved huge amounts of time and improved consistency by switching from manual API docs to auto-generated open API specs. Another example highlights how developers getting involved directly in discovery eliminated those isolated multi-page spec documents entirely, leading to much better shared understanding right from the beginning.
Okay, value number 3.
Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. This is about fostering direct, ongoing interaction with your stakeholders, customers, users, business folks to constantly refine requirements and priorities.
So it's not just about fulfilling the letter of some initial contract or requirement document.
Exactly. The goal, Matt says, is to make sure you're building the right thing, something that actually solves a real user need, not just what someone thought was needed months ago when a rigid contract might have been written. That contract is often outdated the minute it's signed anyway.
So how do I, as a developer, collaborate more effectively with customers or stakeholders?
Well, Matt suggests actively participating in customer-facing discovery sessions and demos. Be there to hear the feedback directly. Focus on understanding the outcome they want, not just the specific feature request. How can your technical solution help them achieve their goal? Also, be proactive. Propose alternative technical solutions if the initial idea hits constraints or user needs evolve. Show flexibility and your problem-solving skills.
Right. Don't just say no, offer alternatives.
Precisely. And always advocate for minimum viable products, MVPs. Push to deliver the core functionality first, get it in front of real users, validate your assumptions, and get that crucial feedback early. It's much less risky than building the whole thing based on guesswork.
Any examples here?
Yeah, Matt tells a story about a health tech developer working on software for dentists. By collaborating directly with dentists in sprint reviews, they got immediate feedback on the UI. Things like needing bigger touch targets for gloved hands or making the graphical UI super intuitive for a busy clinical setting. That kind of direct collaboration is invaluable.
Definitely. Okay, the fourth and final value.
Responding to changeover following a plan. Matt argues that in the complex world of software development, change isn't just likely, it's inevitable. Agile doesn't fight change. It embraces it as an opportunity to improve and adapt rather than seeing it as a failure of the initial plan.
So flexibility is key. How does that play out for a developer?
It means writing a modular, flexible code from the start, designing solutions so they can more easily accommodate changing requirements or future enhancements without needing a massive rewrite. Build for change. It also requires strategic pushback versus openness. Yes, you should absolutely push back against constant, unvalidated scope creep that destabilizes the sprint. But Matt advises you also need to remain open to genuine priority shifts if they're backed by solid data or compelling user feedback. It's a balance.
Okay.
And critically, you have to embrace refactoring. See it as a normal, integral part of the development process, not some optional extra you do if there's time. Continuously improving the code base makes future changes so much easier and less risky.
Refactoring isn't technical debt repayment, it's just good practice.
Exactly, it's preventative maintenance. Matt gives an example of a team that had to refactor their authentication module mid-sprint because of a new regulatory requirement. Because they embraced change and had reasonably clean code, they could adapt and ensure compliance without derailing the whole product launch. That's responsiveness in action.
These 4 values really provide a strong philosophical underpinning. And you mentioned they lead to 12 principles.
They do. The 12 principles offer more specific, actionable guidance. We don't need to list all 12, but let's touch on a few key ones relevant to developers.
Okay.
Like, deliver value early and often. This means shipping small, working, testable increments frequently. Leverage your CI/CD pipelines to automate deployments. Developer insight here, Matt stresses, is that small, high-quality releases build confidence and let you get feedback super quickly.
Makes sense.
Smaller batches are less risky.
Exactly. Another is welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Practices like using feature flags or toggles allow you to deploy code containing changes without necessarily exposing it to all users immediately. It builds that flexibility right into your architecture. Then there's business people and developers must work together daily. Seek clarity. Don't just wait for perfect specifications that might never come. Ask questions. Maybe sketch a quick UML diagram during a conversation to confirm understanding. Strong collaboration, Matt says, bridges that gap between what's technically possible and what the business actually needs.
Communication again.
Always. Then continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. This is about craftsmanship. Invest in tools like linters, automated tests, monitoring. Matt argues passionately that high-quality code isn't a luxury. It reduces rework, improves velocity, and makes future changes easier. It's about working smarter.
Right. Quality enables speed eventually.
Precisely. And finally, at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. That's your retrospective. Use it. Discuss technical debt, bottlenecks, team dynamics. Those small process improvements you agree on can compound into huge productivity gains over time. It's your team's dedicated improvement loop.
Okay, so values and principles drive the mindset. How does this all connect to accountability in Agile for a developer? Sometimes accountability sounds like blame.
That's a common misconception Matt addresses. In Agile, accountability isn't about pointing fingers. It's about ownership, owning your contributions and feeling responsible for driving outcomes.
So what does that look like for me as a developer?
It means ownership of code, taking real pride in what you build, ensuring it not only works, but also meets the team's coding standards and, crucially, the full definition of done, tested, reviewed, documented appropriately, ready to go.
Okay.
It means commitment to quality, balancing the pressure for speed with the need for reliability. This involves advocating for the time needed to address technical debt or implement proper testing. Because, as Matt warns repeatedly, the shortcuts you take today become tomorrow's crippling bugs and system failures.
The cost of cutting corners adds up fast.
Exponentially. And finally, it means embracing collaboration and feedback. Actively engaging with your teammates, testers, designers, POs, and stakeholders to refine solutions. Recognizing that the best solutions rarely come from one person in isolation. Agile thrives on that continuous input and collective brain power.
So it's owning your part, owning quality, and owning the collaboration.
Exactly. Matt shares a couple more quick case studies here. One team drastically improved their sprint outcomes, not by buying a new tool, but simply by adding a daily 15-minute sync between the developers and the PO to clear up ambiguities faster. Lesson: real communication beats relying only on tools.
Simple but effective.
Another case involved a developer who saw a potential scalability issue with a feature while building it. Instead of just flagging it, they proactively proposed and prototyped a better database schema mid-delivery. It prevented major performance problems down the road. Lesson: proactive ownership pays off big time. It's about preventing fires, not just fighting them.
Wow. Okay, lots to think about there. Matt ends this section with a reflection question for the listener.
Yeah, he does. He asks, how do you personally ensure your work aligns with these Agile values? Where could you improve collaboration or be more flexible? What technical practices could you adopt to deliver value faster but with higher quality? He challenges you to think of maybe 2 concrete, actionable changes you could try in your very next sprint.
That's a great challenge. Okay, let's move from the values and mindset into the nitty-gritty, the day-to-day practices and the challenges that inevitably crop up, starting with Chapter 4. Sprint planning and commitment. Matt calls this your launch pad.
Yeah, it's where the sprint officially kicks off. It's a time-boxed meeting where the whole Scrum team collaborates to decide what can realistically be delivered in the upcoming sprint. For you as a developer or tester, Matt stresses, this is your prime opportunity to shape the workload. Ask those critical clarifying questions, identify potential roadblocks early, and refine the scope before you commit.
So it's not just about accepting work, it's about co-creating the plan.
Absolutely. The key outcomes should be a shared understanding across the team, a collective commitment to a specific sprint goal, and a well-prepared sprint backlog containing clearly defined stories the team feels confident they can tackle.
And a big part of that confidence comes from aligning the sprint goal with team capacity, right?
Crucial. A good sprint goal gives the team focus and purpose. But you have to be realistic. As a developer, you need to help the team factor in real-world availability, who's on vacation, are there company meetings, any production support duties.
Right, the actual time people have.
Exactly. And Matt advises reserving some buffer time for unexpected issues because they will happen. Also, explicitly discuss and agree on time boxes, which are often called spikes, for any investigation or research work needed.
And his practical tip here.
Don't be afraid to say no or not yet if the proposed workload feels overloaded. It is always, always better to deliver fewer items really well, meeting that definition of done, than to overcommit and deliver a bunch of half-finished, buggy work. Quality over quantity.
Makes sense. Then comes the task of breaking down user stories. Where do you start?
You start with that standard user story format. As a type of user, I want some goal so that some reason benefit. That keeps the focus on the user value.
Okay.
Then, critically, you define the acceptance criteria, AC. These are the conditions that must be met for the story to be considered complete. Matt insists they should be clear, concise, and testable. Ideally, they can be answered with a simple yes or no.
Can you give an example?
Sure. For, say, a save wish list feature, AC might include user can add items to the list, user can remove items, the list persists after the user logs out and back in, a success message is displayed when an item is saved, things like that. Binary pass-fail.
Got it. And then you slice the story into smaller pieces.
Exactly. Slice it into manageable technical tasks, maybe front-end changes, back-end OPI work, database updates, specific test scenarios to automate. Matt offers a rule of thumb. If a story looks like it will take one person more than, say, 1-2 days to complete, it's probably too big and needs to be broken down further.
And he mentioned doing some of this breakdown before planning.
Yes, during individual backlog refinement. He encourages developers to add technical notes, maybe even list specific code files or functions they anticipate changing, right onto the backlog item. This makes the planning discussion much more concrete and efficient.
Okay, stories are broken down. Now, estimating workload. This could be contentious. What's Matt's take?
His main point is that estimation in Agile isn't primarily about achieving pinpoint accuracy. It's about fostering discussion, uncovering assumptions, and reaching a shared understanding of the work's complexity.
So the conversation is more important than the number itself.
Largely, yes. He also points out why estimating in time, like hours or days, can be problematic for a team. One person's hour is different from another's. That's why he, like many Agile coaches, advocates for relative sizing.
Relative sizing.
Yeah, comparing stories to each other. Considering things like complexity, uncertainty, risk, amount of work involved, but not who is doing the work or how long it will take them specifically. It's about the inherent size of the problem relative to other problems the team has solved.
So techniques like story points or t-shirt sizes.
Exactly. Story points, using a sequence like Fibonacci, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, etc., are common for user stories. T-shirt sizing, XS, S, M, L, XL, is often better for larger items like features or epics early on. Time-based estimates might be okay for very small, well-defined tasks within a story, but use them cautiously for the stories themselves.
And what factors should influence the estimate?
Complexity is key. How much thinking is involved? Dependencies, does it rely on other teams or systems? Team capacity, what's our historical velocity? And risk, how much uncertainty is there?
And how do you get the team to agree on an estimate?
Techniques like planning poker work well. Everyone estimates privately, then reveals simultaneously. If there are big differences, the high and low estimators explain their reasoning. It sparks that crucial conversation. Matt's advice to developers, be honest. Don't lowball to please people, and don't pad excessively. Aim for a realistic assessment based on the discussion.
Good advice. Now, planning sounds great in theory, but things can go wrong. Matt highlights some red flags in sprint planning.
Oh yeah, definitely things to watch out for. The first big one is unclear stories. Vague descriptions, missing or ambiguous acceptance criteria, classic signs of trouble ahead.
What's the solution?
Ask questions. Use refinement sessions effectively. If a story isn't ready, push back, say it needs more clarification before it can come into the sprint. Matt is adamant. Say no if it's vague. He uses that iceberg analogy, you only see the tip, but the hidden complexity underneath will sink your sprint. It's a setup for failure and frustration.
Okay, what are the red flags?
Overcommitting. Teams biting off way more than they can chew, often due to pressure or optimism.
How to counter that?
Use your historical velocity data. Show the product owner, look, we typically complete X amount of work, and this plan is 1.5X. Push back politely but firmly. Again, Matt says, say no to overcommitting. Focus on delivering the agreed goal with quality.
Right.
Another is skipping dependencies, just assuming other teams will deliver what you need or that systems will magically work together.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
Very. Solution. Identify dependencies explicitly during refinement and planning. Communicate proactively, get the Scrum Master involved if needed to coordinate with other teams. Address them up front, don't just hope they'll resolve themselves.
And the last red flag.
Ignoring technical debt. Focusing exclusively on shiny new features and never allocating time to fix underlying issues or refactor messy code.
How do you fight that?
You have to advocate for it. Make the case for including tech debt reduction or refactoring time in the sprint backlog. Quantify the impact if you can. This slow build costs us X hours per week. And critically, use your definition of done as a gate to prevent new defects or shoddy code from getting through in the first place.
So planning sets the stage. What about the daily rhythm? Chapter 5 is daily Scrum participation, Matt's pit stop.
Yeah, that 15-minute daily sync. It's purely for the development team to align, check progress towards the sprint goal, and, crucially, surface any blockers. Matt likens it to a quick pit stop in a race. Check the tires, refuel slightly, make sure everyone's aligned for the next lap. It's designed to keep things on track and make progress transparent.
Okay, so how do I, as a team member, make the most of those 15 minutes?
First, share relevant updates, but keep it concise. Focus on what's essential for your teammates to know about your progress towards the sprint goal and any implications for them. Avoid deep technical dives unless they're directly causing a blocker for someone else.
So what's a good versus bad update?
Good. Finished the API endpoint for StoryX yesterday. Today I'm starting the front-end integration. No blockers. Bad. Still working on that thing from yesterday. Keep it brief, maybe 1-2 minutes max per person. If a longer discussion is needed, Matt suggests taking it offline immediately after the scrum.
Okay, keep it snappy. What else?
Second, and this is vital, highlight blockers without hesitation. If you're stuck waiting on someone, unclear requirements, technical issue, raise it immediately. Don't wait. Frame it as a team problem to solve collaboratively, not as a personal failure. Matt suggests using phrases like, I could use some help with, or I'm blocked on X, does anyone have context on?
So make it easy for others to help.
Exactly. And third, always try to align on the sprint goal. Connect your update back to how it contributes to the overall goal for the sprint. This helps prevent the team from just drifting off into individual, disconnected tasks. It keeps everyone focused on the collective objective.
Got it. Are there common ways the daily Scrum goes wrong? Matt mentions pitfalls.
Yeah, definitely. A classic pitfall is it turning into a status report to the Scrum Master or product owner rather than a planning and collaboration session for the development team.
Right, it's for the team, by the team.
Exactly. Another is getting too technical and losing people or wasting time. Save the deep dives. Ignoring blockers or downplaying them is also bad. It just delays resolution. And, of course, rambling updates that go way over time and don't add much value.
So keep it focused, collaborative, and blocker aware.
Precisely. Matt also stresses the importance of psychological safety here. The team needs to feel safe to admit they're stuck or made a mistake without fear of blame. Celebrating small wins and fostering collaboration, like offering help when someone raises a blocker, builds that trust.
Okay, daily Scrum keeps things moving. Now, let's talk about the output. Chapter 6. Delivering the increment, your signature on the product. What exactly is an increment again?
The increment is the sum of all the product backlog items completed during the sprint, plus the value of increments from previous sprints. Crucially, it must meet the team's definition of done. It needs to be usable and potentially shippable, even if you don't actually release it to end users immediately. Matt says to think of it as your team's collective signature on the product, a statement of quality and completeness for that sprint's work.
So how do we ensure we're building that quality increment? Matt talks about writing code with the end in mind.
Yes. First step, start with the acceptance criteria. Before you write a single line of code, make sure you fully understand what done looks like for that story. What conditions must it meet? If anything is unclear, Matt says stop and ask the PO or testers immediately. Don't guess.
Clarity again.
Always. Second, embrace incremental development. Break the work down into the smallest possible testable pieces. Maybe build the basic UI first, then the API endpoint, then connect them. Commit your code frequently in small batches. This reduces risk and makes integration easier.
And third,
prioritize clean code. Matt is really strong on this. It works is not good enough. Your code needs to adhere to team standards, use meaningful names, be well-structured, modular, and you should refactor as you go to keep it clean. It has to be understandable and easily extendable by others or by your future self. It's professional craftsmanship.
Okay, so good coding practices are foundational, but then there's building quality into the increment. Matt calls this a must-do.
He does, and he means it. This isn't optional. First, test as you go. Don't wait until the end. Write unit tests, integration tests, maybe even some end-to-end E2E tests as you develop. Use standard frameworks like Jest, PyTest, JONIT, whatever fits your stack. Second, continuous integration, CI. Automate your builds and run your automated tests every time someone pushes code. This catches integration errors and regressions super early when they're cheap and easy to fix. Push small, frequent changes to avoid painful merges.
Makes sense.
Third, peer reviews. Have another pair of eyes look at your code before it gets merged. This catches bugs, ensures consistency with team standards, shares knowledge, and improves overall code quality. Matt advises keeping pull requests small and focused, maybe using a checklist, and always giving constructive, respectful feedback. Treat it as a learning opportunity for everyone involved.
Okay, testing, CI, reviews. What about getting it deployed?
That brings us to integration and deployment. First, you have to manage dependencies, proactively know what your code relies on, and ensure those parts are available or mocked appropriately. Second, and non-negotiable, is meeting the definition of done. This is your quality gate. Does the code work? Is it reviewed? Do all the tests pass? Are there no known defects? Is documentation updated? Is it successfully integrated? Matt is emphatic. A story isn't done if it has bugs. Fixing them now costs far less than fixing them later when they're buried under more code.
That point about defects feels critical. Don't let them escape the sprint.
Absolutely critical. He calls it the stage gate. Then there's continuous delivery, CD. Aim to automate your deployment process as much as possible so you can release your increment easily and reliably whenever needed. Practices like feature flags and automated rollback mechanisms help here. Even if you don't deploy to production every day, Matt suggests aiming for CDE to a staging or test environment.
And collaboration during this delivery phase.
Still key. Matt advises pairing with testers early, and often they can spot issues you miss, and you can help them understand the changes. And maintain good communication with stakeholders, giving clear updates on progress and explaining any necessary trade-offs.
Now, Matt has a specific section here on the role of developers and testers in backlog refinement. You mentioned individual refinement earlier.
Yes, and he really dives into it here. He points out that while group refinement is common, the Scrum Guide actually suggests teams dedicate around 10% of their sprint capacity to refinement activities. He strongly advocates for using a good chunk of this time for individual preparation before the group session, maybe a full day in a 2-week sprint.
A full day. That sounds like a lot.
It might sound like it, but Matt argues it's incredibly valuable. He calls it debugging the sprint before it begins. It's your dedicated time to really understand upcoming stories, analyze them technically, and identify questions or issues before you're under pressure in sprint planning, or worse, mid-sprint.
So what should I be doing during this individual refinement time?
As a developer, you'd review the story and acceptance criteria, think through the potential code changes needed, maybe even jot down notes about specific files, functions, or modules, identify potential dependencies or risks, and perhaps make an initial rough estimate of its relative size.
Okay. And for a tester, or
Sure.
a developer wearing a testing hat.
They should be designing test scenarios, thinking about positive paths, negative paths, edge cases, maybe using a format like Gherkin, given when then, to structure them. They should also identify what needs test automation and highlight any dependencies needed for testing, like specific test environments or APIs.
And the outcome of this individual prep.
The outcome should be backlog items that have much clearer technical notes, detailed test scenarios already considered, and a list of identified gaps, questions for the PO, potential blockers, dependencies noted.
And the benefit.
Matt argues it leads to much smoother, faster sprint planning meetings, significantly fewer surprises and disruptions mid-sprint, higher quality stories coming into the sprint, and overall stronger collaboration because everyone comes to the group refinement better prepared. He insists, schedule this sacred time. Don't let it get squeezed out by other demands.
That's a really interesting perspective on refinement. Okay, the sprint is done, the increment is delivered. Next comes Chapter 7, retrospectives and continuous improvement. Matt called this your process code review.
Yeah, another great analogy. The retrospective is that regular ceremony, usually at the end of the sprint, where the team pauses to reflect. What worked well? What challenges did we face? And most importantly, what specific improvements will we try to implement next sprint? It's about inspecting and adapting your process, just like you inspect and adapt the product.
And what's my role as a developer in the retro?
Your contribution is vital. Matt suggests a few things. First, bring data if possible. Don't just rely on feelings. If you think testing was slow, maybe look at cycle time metrics. If bug counts were high, mention that. Data helps ground the discussion. Second, speak up about technical debt and other technical issues. Explain the impact. Don't just say the code is messy. Say, refactoring this module could cut our test suite runtime in half. Or, addressing this debt will make future features in this area much faster to build. Frame it as an investment in future speed and stability.
Is it connected to value?
Exactly. And third, focus on solutions, not just complaining. If you raise a problem, try to suggest a possible solution or experiment. Frameworks like start, stop, continue can be helpful here. For example, stop starting stories without clear AC. Start pairing on complex tasks. Continue our daily deployment practice.
And how do you make sure the improvements actually happen?
That's key. Matt stresses the need to make retro outcomes actionable. Don't try to fix everything at once. Prioritize maybe 1 or 2 key improvement items for the next sprint. Assign clear ownership for each action item, and make sure you track progress in subsequent retrospectives. Otherwise, it's just talk.
Okay, makes sense.
This has been a fantastic deep dive, really unpacking some incredibly valuable insights from Matt Coxall's Agile How-To. We've gone from the core values and why they matter to your vital role in product discovery, busting some persistent myths, and finally, nailing down those skills and mindsets for truly thriving. These really feel like principles that can elevate anyone's game as a developer or tester on an Agile team.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Reflecting on everything we've discussed today, what's maybe one small concrete change you could commit to trying in your very next sprint? One thing to embody these principles a bit more and help yourself and your team thrive just that little bit better.
That's a great question to ponder. Thank you so much for sharing all that insight. And thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Follow this podcast and find the books through agileproducthub.com.